In a major ruling that strikes at the heart of South Africa's industrial crisis, the Labour Court has ordered steel giant ArcelorMittal South Africa to reinstate workers it retrenched as its Newcastle and Vereeniging plants. The court found the consultation process flawed, ordering the company to go back to the drawing board, restart talks with the union and pay the workers backdated salaries. This is more than a legal victory. It's a dramatic flashpoint in the battle for the soul of South Africa's strategic industries. The government has already stepped in with 417 million rand lifeline to pay workers' salaries via the TERS scheme while the IDC negotiates a potential purchase. But the union, NUMSA, is pushing for a far more radical solution: the nationalization of the company to save these plants and secure the country's steel-making capacity. To unpack the legal win, the political battle, and what this means for thousands of workers in the entire economy, we're joined by Phakamile Hlubi-Majola, the national spokesperson for NUMSA. Phakamile, always good to speak to you. Welcome to the show. Now, this court ruling is a significant win for NUMSA. Beyond the reinstatement and back pay, what does this judgment fundamentally force ArcelorMittal to do differently in these new consultations?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Yes, it is indeed a very important victory led by NUMSA on behalf of workers in the Newcastle operations as well as Vereeniging, whose livelihoods were basically hanging by a thread. ArcelorMittal South Africa on the 21st of October announced that it was terminating these workers because in its view, the retrenchment process had been concluded and it was thus proceeding with retrenchments. And we are very, very happy that the Labour Court agreed with us when we rushed to court to try and reverse this decision on the 8th of October. We're very happy that the court agreed with us on the fact that we had raised in our arguments that there was room for NUMSA to negotiate further, particularly because in the period when NUMSA unilaterally suspended the retrenchment consultations, and they suspended those consultations in March without consulting anyone, things have happened since then. For example, government has made an offer to purchase ArcelorMittal South Africa. There's a whole due diligence process happening there. And we said to the court that this factor is one of the fundamental reasons why the court must assist us and compel NUMSA to restart the negotiations process and the consultation process, because that matter is a material matter. It possibly refers to alternatives, and that must be properly engaged on because it can be an alternative to retrenchment.
Now, NUMSA obviously has appealed the decision by the court, but the court found the consultation process flawed, ordering the company to go back to the drawing board and restart talks. So let's talk about the resumption of these talks. If they are to happen, what's on the table? What are your expectations as NUMSA?
Well, yes, it is disappointing that NUMSA has applied for leave to appeal. We are waiting for the court to give us a date so that we can obviously give our submissions on that. They have not yet been granted the right to appeal. They have to obviously get that permission from the court, and we're waiting for that process. But the unfortunate thing is that the application for leave to appeal means that it suspends the decision of the court, and that decision being that NUMSA must actually consult with us meaningfully. So that is disappointing. However, if we were to get the right to be able to proceed with consultations, then the way that would look like for us would be a process where we're able to fully and properly ventilate the IDC's process, where IDC has said that it has requested or intends to buy ArcelorMittal South Africa. We feel that as workers, we are an important stakeholder. We are the ones who are directly affected by any decision to retrench. But more importantly, and I'm sure your viewers are aware of the reports that have emerged, that should NUMSA go ahead with the mothballing, in fact, they already have, as of the 21st of October, gone ahead with the mothballing of the plant in Newcastle and Vereeniging, that this would have, beyond the job cuts of more than 3,000 workers directly, the impact would be that along the value chain, the impact would be devastating on the South African economy, and we're looking at possibly 100,000 jobs, if not more, that could be affected by that. We're also looking at a very serious level of deindustrialization. This would have a real impact on the role that the country plays in providing steel to the auto sector. So if you're looking at all of those issues and how this decision actually plays very strongly into the, into having a negative impact on the growth of the South African economy, it is actually in all of our interests for us to engage properly, meaningfully, and what that would look like would be for us to interrogate the IDC's offer and ensure that this offer is a viable offer and a viable process for the long-term sustainability of NUMSA. NUMSA has also said in its statement that we would actually like to see a complete takeover of government of ArcelorMittal South Africa, because we do acknowledge, like many other economists, that the steel sector is a very strategic sector which can play a very important role in boosting manufacturing in this country and thus decisively tackling the unemployment crisis that we currently face.
Phakamile, I'm interested in knowing the well-being of the 3,000 workers that were impacted by this retrenchment several months ago.
Well, I mean, our members are very stressed out, to put it simply, about this entire process, because you must understand that Newcastle is a small town. Even Vereeniging is not a big industrial area. So in the communities immediately nearby ArcelorMittal in those two parts of the country, you have communities that exist as a result of the jobs that are being created by the existence of ArcelorMittal South Africa. It's not just the direct employment of NUMSA, but all of the little businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises that provide services to this company and other suppliers that would be directly affected. So the fact that we are right now looking at the mothballing of these plants has a very potentially devastating impact on the local economy in Citybeng and also in Newcastle. So obviously as NUMSA, we have an interest in trying to find a real alternative to this. Our members are very worried because in those areas, if those jobs are lost, it is unlikely that those jobs will be replaced, which means that these workers will just join the ever-growing sea of unemployment. This will deepen the socioeconomic crisis that we're facing. I don't think I have to tell your viewers about the research that Stats SA did a couple of years ago, confirming that employed workers support 5 to 7 unemployed family members. So when you talk about job losses, you are never just talking about job losses of those who are directly employed, but you have to look at how this impacts on workers and their families. So we really cannot afford for this to continue. Workers themselves are very distressed about the situation because they know that they're unlikely to have any plan B with regards to this. And whatever settlement financially that NUMSA pays out in the form of retrenchment packages is not really going to mitigate against this broader, devastating socioeconomic situation that I've just outlined to you.
Now the government has pledged 417 million rand to pay the salaries of nearly 3,000 workers for a year. Do you see this as a genuine commitment to saving these plants, or is it merely a temporary political fix that potentially kicks the can down the road?
Well, first of all, NUMSA is actually responsible for the fact that government was even considering the TERS payment, the Temporary Employee Relief Scheme, as a solution to try and offset and mitigate against the financial challenges that NUMSA was facing. We are the ones that actually approached government and spearheaded this as a solution, because we've been very active from the time that NUMSA made this announcement in November 2023 that they wanted to mothball these plants. We've done absolutely everything possible as a union to try and find some form of alternatives that will help to prolong the running of the plants, but also that would also ensure that workers are cushioned against any financial devastation as a result of that. So, of course, we do support TERS support from government. It is in our interest. We do not think that it would help for us to just simply fold our arms and allow NUMSA to get away with prematurely, in our view, mothballing these plants. We think that all avenues must be properly explored, and all avenues would include support through TERS. It would include a plan, a long-term sustainable plan, including the one suggested by the IDC of purchasing NUMSA outright.
Now, you've called for nationalization of NUMSA. Now, ArcelorMittal cites high energy costs, port and rail failures, and cheap imports as reasons for its closure. Now, even if the state took over, it would still face these same systemic challenges. How can a nationalized steel company succeed where a private one claims it cannot?
Previously, before ArcelorMittal South Africa was ArcelorMittal, it was actually ISCO, which was a state-owned entity owned by the apartheid government. And the role and the reason the apartheid government had created an ISCO was because even back then they recognized the importance of a viable steel sector to support industrialization, which would enable the economy to grow and would enable mass employment through the creation of a very viable and robust manufacturing sector. And this is why NUMSA is pushing for nationalization of ArcelorMittal South Africa. We're simply saying that the state must take back what it previously owned. Secondly, yes, you're right, that the state, should it nationalize, would face the same challenges. But because this is a state-owned entity, the state would then have to directly intervene in repairing or in correcting those issues which have created the hostile environment that NUMSA claims it is working through. So, for example, one of the issues that NUMSA has raised is the dumping of cheap steel onto the market. NUMSA has always said that government needs to implement protectionist measures to protect the domestic steel industry, and it can do so through tariffs. So we would argue that if it nationalizes NUMSA, it then has the right to intervene directly in those situations and ensure that steel is not dumped onto the market. It also means that government would have to engage with its other partner, its other SOE, which is Eskom, and negotiate cheaper cheaper energy costs, which would allow NUMSA to be able to, produce steel more cheaply because the cost of energy has been reduced. NUMSA's position has always been that Eskom should be, first of all, made into a very viable state-owned entity, which is well-run, where corruption has been rooted out. But secondly, that Eskom must never leave the hands of the state, that Eskom should actually be strengthened so that it can provide cheap energy tariffs for business and also for domestic use. China has done this. China is benefiting through this. The reason China is right now the biggest manufacturing hub in the world, and the fact that it is even able to do what it is doing by dumping cheap steel onto our market, is because, number one, China recognizes that cheap energy is strategic for industrialization, economic growth, and mass employment. And as a country that already has an SOE that provides energy, we are in a position to ensure that we provide cheap energy by intervening on the cost of energy in this country.
Phakamile, always good to speak to you. Appreciate your time. NUMSA National Spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi-Majola speaking to us on the announcement that made by the Labour Court that ArcelorMittal is to reinstate almost 3,000 workers that were retrenched.